The night before exams, I had put together a fresh set of notes for Archer, everything he'd need to tackle his toughest subjects. There was a lightness in my steps as I made my way to his door, ready to knock. And then I heard his voice. Man, I'm so over these exams. This town, too. I can't wait for college. Finally, a fresh start. I can leave all this behind. His friend Damian's voice broke through the tension, a casual reply. Yeah, it'll be good to get rid of the shadow, huh? You know the one. Oh, you mean, April. She's been a persistent stain on my life since junior high. She's a clingy parasite. She's so desperately in love with me that she's turned into my personal stalker. It's pathetic and annoying, and I can't wait to get rid of her. The first thing I'm going to do is stop answering her calls. Hey you. Welcome to Cupidoops, where love and logic are officially divorced, and chaos has full custody. Chaos begin. Chapter 1. Archer. He was the boy next door, and for the longest time, he was everything I thought I wanted. My world. My everything. At first, it was like a quiet ache in the pit of my stomach whenever I saw him, a longing so deep I thought it might swallow me whole. I couldn't quite place it, but I knew that there was something about him that made my chest tighten, a feeling that felt both comforting and unnerving all at once. He wasn't just some boy from my neighborhood. No, he was the boy. The one I prayed for every night, the one I dreamt about every time I let myself get lost in my thoughts. The one I imagined myself with, the one I thought I was meant to be with. I never questioned it. I simply accepted that he was meant to be in my life, and I thought it was a matter of time before that feeling became reality. Our story started like something out of a cheesy movie, a rescue on a dusty playground. I can still picture it. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything, and I had just been pushed to the ground by some mean girls who thought they could make me the punchline of their jokes. I was loud, emotional, and different, and they knew how to target me. I was the easy target, the girl with fiery red hair and a temper to match. The teasing, the taunting, it always hurt more than I let on. But then, he stepped in. I remember the exact moment. It was as if the world paused for a second, and I could hear nothing but the soft thud of my heart racing in my chest. Archer. He wasn't tall like the other boys. He wasn't the loudest. But there was something about him that made him stand out in ways I couldn't explain. When the bullies started circling me, their voices rising in taunts, he walked right up to them. Hey, he said, his voice low, but carrying an authority that was impossible to ignore. They didn't even know how to respond. Archer didn't shout, didn't get angry. He didn't need to. It was in the way he stood, calm, yet firm, and the way he looked at them. He didn't need to say much. His presence alone had an effect on them. The bullies backed off, muttering insults under their breath before they scattered like leaves in the wind. But I didn't hear them anymore. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat and the feeling that something in me had just shifted. Something had clicked into place. From that moment on, I was hooked. Archer became my protector. My hero. He was the kind of person you thought only existed in stories. Someone who would always have your back, no matter what. He was perfect. In every single way. And maybe that was where I went wrong. Maybe that was the beginning of the end. I had made him perfect in my mind. We grew up side by side, our houses separated by a fence that was more a suggestion than a boundary. I could practically reach out and touch his house from my window if I stretched my arm far enough. He was never too far away. Neither of us could remember a time when we hadn't been together. We built forts in the woods, our laughter echoing into the night as we pretended to be anything we wanted. Knights, explorers, adventurers. We made promises to each other, little vows sealed with a handshake or a smile. I always felt so alive with him. It was as if the world shrunk to just the two of us. We spent hours talking about our dreams, our futures, the things that kept us up at night. He was the only person who truly understood me. I was the girl who had a million ideas but often no way to make them happen. And Archer, well, he was the quiet force that grounded me. I don't think I ever stopped to consider that maybe he didn't see me the way I saw him. I never thought about it. I didn't need to think about it. Because in my mind, I already knew. We were meant to be together. There was no other option. I didn't even have to question it. It was intense. I knew that. It wasn't always easy for people to understand, and sometimes I wondered if I was too much, if I came across as overwhelming. But Archer? He never seemed to mind. He was always there, always present. I followed him around like a shadow, wanting to be near him, to know everything about him. I couldn't help it. He was the center of my universe. I remember bringing him his favorite coffee, knowing exactly how he liked it, black with just a touch of sugar. I would leave little notes in his locker, always signed with a smiley face. Good luck on your test today. You're going to crush it at the game. It felt like the little things I did were somehow tying us closer together, like threads weaving our lives into something greater than just friendship. At least, that's what I thought. I thought we were more than just friends, but less than lovers. We were something in between, something special and intimate. I didn't realize that maybe Archer didn't see me the same way. Or maybe he did, but didn't know how to handle it. Either way, I was in it, fully, with all of my heart. And I didn't know how to pull back. I couldn't. I spent so much time at his house, and I never once questioned it. I didn't think about the fact that I was always there, always present. It was just the way things were. His mother, Sarah, was always so kind to me, like I was a part of the family. Her smile was warm, like the sun, and whenever I walked into their kitchen, the smell of freshly baked goods was always in the air, wrapping itself around me like a soft, comforting blanket. Sarah was the kind of woman you couldn't help but love. She had a way of making everyone feel like they were her family. I would sit at their kitchen table, watching her prepare meals, chatting with her about school, about life, about everything. There was something about her that felt so safe, so comforting. She would always call me her adopted daughter, and I would laugh, feeling like a part of something bigger, something warmer. I loved being there. I loved the way their house smelled, the way Sarah's laughter filled the air. It felt like home. More than my own house ever had. I always felt like I belonged there, like I was part of their world in a way I didn't feel in my own. Archer would often join us at the table, and we'd eat dinner together, talking about our days, about everything and nothing all at once. His eyes would light up when he spoke about something he was passionate about, whether it was sports or the books he was reading. And I would listen, hanging on to every word, thinking about how lucky I was to know him, to be so close to him. But the more time I spent there, the more I realized something. There was always this thing hanging in the air, this unspoken feeling between us, something that neither of us could name. I couldn't figure out if it was the excitement of being so close to him, or something deeper, something I was afraid to face. But whatever it was, I couldn't shake it. And I didn't want to. Maybe that's why I kept pushing. I kept trying to find ways to be close to him, to be with him. I thought that maybe, if I showed him enough of my love, my care, my attention, it would finally click. Maybe he would finally see me the way I saw him. But I never stopped to wonder if maybe he didn't need all of that. Maybe he didn't want me to be everything to him. But I didn't think about that then. I was too caught up in my own emotions, in the feeling of being near him, of being a part of his world. And maybe that was the problem. I was so wrapped up in what I wanted, and in what I needed, that I didn't stop to think about what Archer might have wanted, what he might have needed. I didn't stop to think that maybe he wasn't as invested in me as I was in him. I was April, and Archer was my world. But the truth? The truth was, I didn't know if Archer had ever really seen me the way I saw him. Chapter 2. My love for Archer, it wasn't a slow burn. It was like a wildfire that consumed me, relentless and powerful. It was that innocent, naive kind of love that makes you believe that everything is perfect, that you found the one person who is your soul mate, the person who would walk through life with you hand in hand. I remember the feeling so clearly, those late-night prayers where I would lie in bed, eyes closed, hoping that the love I felt for him would grow, would deepen, and would finally make him see me for who I was. I pray for us, I'd whisper into the night, for our happiness, for our future, for our love. I never doubted it, not for a second. Every word I prayed felt like it would make him realize what I already knew in my heart, that we were meant to be together, that I was the one he needed. He just hadn't seen it yet. I was obsessed. I was addicted to the idea of him, to the version of him that I had created in my mind. I built him up in my head, slowly weaving a fairy tale out of the fragments of our childhood, of those moments when we'd laugh together or share a secret. I saw him through a lens of endless possibility, where everything was ideal, where we were perfect for each other. It was a dream I clung to, a dream that I convinced myself would come true. As we grew older, my feelings for Archer shifted from a simple crush to something much deeper, something that began to consume my every thought, my every action. My love was quiet, desperate, and naive all at once. I don't think I even understood just how toxic it had become. I didn't see the warning signs, didn't realize how much of myself I was losing in the process. I thought it was love, but it wasn't. Not really. It was a one-sided obsession. A longing to be seen, to be wanted, to be enough for him. I told myself that I was certain we were destined to be together. It was only a matter of time, I believed. All I needed was for him to realize that I was the one, that I was the person he had been waiting for, the one who had always been there for him. I had everything planned out in my head. A future. A life. A love story that would unfold like the pages of a book. All I needed was for him to catch up, to see the truth that was so obvious to me. And then, there was that afternoon. That one perfect moment by the creek, the spot where we had spent so many afternoons, just us, with the soft gurgle of water flowing past and the smell of earth and leaves in the air. It was there, in that quiet spot, that I thought to myself, this is it. My heart was pounding in my chest, a nervous drumbeat, and my hands were clammy. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say over and over in my mind, but now that the moment was here, it didn't come out quite as planned. The words were clumsy, tumbling from my lips as though my heart had a mind of its own. I love you, Archer, I blurted out, the words hanging in the air between us. His eyes widened just slightly. He took a breath, as though unsure of how to respond, and then his lips curved into that gentle, familiar smile that I had come to rely on over the years. But it wasn't the smile I had hoped for. It wasn't the smile of someone who felt the same way. It was a smile filled with affection, but not the kind I had dreamt of. April, he said softly, brushing my hand lightly with his. I appreciate your honesty, but I don't think I'm ready for anything more than just friendship. You're a great person, but I don't see you like that. His words didn't sting at first. They were gentle, carefully chosen, but they hit me harder than I could have ever anticipated. They pierced through the bubble I had built around myself, the bubble where I believed he was the one. I had imagined this moment so many times, but in every version, he was always supposed to feel the same way I did. Instead, he had let me down so softly, like a feather landing on the ground. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at him, trying to process what he had just said. My mind was screaming, telling me this couldn't be real. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had poured my heart into this moment, into him, and I couldn't understand why he couldn't feel the same. But I couldn't show him that. I couldn't let him see how deeply his words had wounded me. Instead, I plastered on a smile, even though my insides felt like they were crumbling. I understand, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. I wanted you to know. I thought you should know how I feel. Archer gave me a soft nod, his eyes still filled with kindness. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't dismissive. But he also wasn't in love with me. Not in the way I had wanted. Not in the way I had convinced myself we were meant to be. Thank you, he said, for being brave enough to say it. You're important to me, April. You always will be. But those words didn't fill the void inside me. They didn't change the way my heart ached for something more. I knew, in that moment, that I wasn't going to stop loving him. I wasn't going to stop hoping that maybe one day, he'd see me the way I saw him. It was impossible for me to let go, to walk away from the love I had built in my mind, from the dream of us. So, I didn't stop. I didn't let his rejection change my actions. I continued to shower him with affection, with love that was unwavering despite his quiet reservations. I didn't care that he hadn't reciprocated my feelings. I thought, maybe if I kept loving him, kept being there for him, eventually he would come to see what I saw. I brought him his favorite coffee, every day, without fail. I wrote him notes, small little reminders of how much I cared. I attended every sporting event, every school function, every moment where he was present. I thought, he'll see me eventually. He'll come around. But deep down, a small part of me knew that I was deluding myself. I knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, that he didn't feel the same way. But I pushed that thought down. I pushed it down so deep that I couldn't hear it anymore. I convinced myself that he was just waiting for the right moment to realize how much I meant to him. I couldn't accept that my love was unrequited. It wasn't just rejection I was facing. It was the slow, agonizing realization that the person I had built my whole world around didn't see me the way I saw him. I had to be his person. I had to be the one who mattered. So I continued. I continued with the notes, the coffees, and the constant presence in his life, convinced that I was something special to him, convinced that somehow, someday, he would see me for the woman I truly was. But every time I tried to get closer, every time I poured myself more into him, I was met with the same gentle affection that I had always known. And each time, it felt less like love and more like a reminder that I was still just his friend. In those quiet moments when I was alone, I could feel the weight of my obsession. I knew I was in too deep, but I didn't know how to pull myself out. I had given so much of myself to him, invested so much of my heart, that I didn't know how to be anyone else but the person who loved him. I was his shadow. And in my heart, That was enough. Senior year. That was supposed to be our year. It was supposed to be the year we took the world by storm. College applications, graduation. Our future was right there, shimmering ahead of us like a bright, golden road. I had all my plans made, our plans. The life we would build after high school, together. College campuses, shared apartments, late-night study sessions, laughing over pizza, and the slow, steady rhythm of a love that I believed would carry us through every season of our lives. But then, the universe had other ideas. Or maybe I was just naive. Maybe I was too hopeful, too wrapped up in the dream I had created in my mind. The truth was, life wasn't as simple as I had imagined. The dreams I had painted on the walls of my heart began to crack, and as senior year unfolded, it was clear that the cracks were too deep to ignore. Exams were looming, and the pressure was high for everyone. But I had made it my personal mission to ensure that Archer, the boy who had unknowingly captured my heart, would be as prepared as I was. He wasn't the study type, never had been. While I thrived in the classroom, Archer often preferred the easy way out, skimming through his assignments, taking shortcuts, putting off studying until the last minute. I couldn't understand why he didn't care the way I did, why he didn't see the importance of the future we were about to step into. But I loved him. So I did what I could to help. I spent countless nights poring over textbooks, taking meticulous notes, breaking down each subject until it made sense. I stayed up late, drinking endless cups of coffee, all for him. I made sure his notes were organized, clear, and easy to follow. I would walk to his house after school, walking up the familiar path that had once felt like home, and I would knock on his door, my heart racing in anticipation. I wasn't just delivering notes, I was delivering myself, offering him a piece of my love, my devotion, hoping he'd see me in a way that I knew I was meant to be seen. It wasn't just about the notes. It wasn't just about studying. It was about showing him that I was there for him, that I would always be there for him. I thought, if I work hard enough, if I give enough of myself, he'll see it. He'll see me. But it was also something deeper, something I could hardly admit even to myself. It was a desperate attempt to make him notice me, to make him realize that I was always there, waiting for him to see what I already knew, we were meant to be together. The night before exams, I had put together a fresh set of notes for Archer, everything he'd need to tackle his toughest subjects. There was a lightness in my steps as I made my way to his door, my heart racing with that familiar mix of nerves and excitement I always felt before seeing him. But something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The air carried a strange tension, almost heavy, but I brushed it aside. I had a reason for being here. I was here to help him. So, I walked up to his door, ready to knock. And then I heard his voice. The door wasn't fully closed, just slightly open, and his words slipped through the gap like a slow-burning sting. Words I never expected. Words that didn't belong to the Archer I knew. His voice sounded different, colder, distant in a way that sent a chill down my spine. Man, I'm so over these exams. This town, too. I can't wait for college. Finally, a fresh start. I can leave all this behind. I stopped in my tracks. The warmth I'd always associated with him was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, something I didn't recognize. Without thinking, I leaned in closer, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because I needed to understand. What was this? What was happening to the boy I had loved for so long? His friend Damian's voice broke through the tension, a casual reply. Yeah, it'll be good to get rid of the shadow, huh? You know the one. The shadow? I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I couldn't stop myself from listening. My legs were frozen in place, my hand still hovering over the door, poised to knock. What do you mean? Jonathan, another one of his friends, asked. Archer's response was casual, almost dismissive, like the words were no big deal. But to me, they were everything. The world I had built with him, the world I had clung to for so long, was crumbling right in front of me, shattered by those words. Oh, you know, April. She's been a persistent stain on my life since junior high. A permanent rash that I can't seem to get rid of. Always around, always calling, always expecting something. It's exhausting. She's obsessed with me. It's actually embarrassing. Always annoying me with her messages, calls, and all her childish stuff. Can't she just see that I don't care? That I'm trying to live my own life? Damian's laughter echoed through the room, like a slap to my face. Man, I thought she was your girl. She acts like you two are a thing. And then, Archer's words cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. Full of utter contempt, full of scorn, he said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Girl? Please, She's a clingy parasite. She's so desperately in love with me that she's turned into my personal stalker. It's pathetic and annoying, and I can't wait to get rid of her. The first thing I'm going to do is stop answering her calls. The air seemed to leave my lungs. I was paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, my body trembling with the weight of what I had just heard. A parasite. A clingy, desperate parasite. That's how he saw me. That's how the boy I had loved, the boy who had once been my best friend, the boy I thought was my soulmate, saw me. My heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, each word from him cutting deeper than the last. A stain. A rash. A parasite. How could he say those things? How could he not see what I had given him? The love, the devotion, the sacrifices I had made. How could he so easily turn it all into something ugly? Something shameful? I had always been there for him. I had always loved him, even when I thought I wasn't enough. And now, I was nothing but an annoyance to him. A burden. A mistake. I turned away from the door, my hand shaking. I didn't knock. I couldn't. If I had, I would have collapsed right there, in front of him, shattered beyond repair. The world seemed to tilt beneath me as I stumbled away from his house, my legs barely able to hold me up. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to get away. To escape. There was no anger in me. No rage. Only this deep, suffocating emptiness. A hollowness that filled every part of me, leaving me feeling like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal. How had I been so wrong? How had I been so blind? I had believed in him. I had believed in us. But now, all of that was gone. It was a lie. All of it. The love, the loyalty, the devotion. It was all wasted on someone who didn't care. Someone who had never cared the way I did. I had given him my heart, my soul, my everything, and in return, I was nothing. Nothing but a stain to be wiped away, a parasite to be cast aside. My knees gave way, and I sank down into the cold earth, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable, streaming down my face as I let myself crumble. I had given so much, and for what? For this? For a cruel joke? I had loved him with everything I had. But to him, I was nothing more than a problem to be gotten rid of. I had been a fool. A pathetic fool who had wasted her life on a lie. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions of daily life, attending classes, studying for exams. But inside, I felt like I was floating through the world, disconnected and hollow, like a ghost walking through the motions. I didn't care about the grades, the exams, or the future anymore. All that mattered was the crushing weight in my chest. I couldn't shake his words. They echoed in my mind constantly, a relentless reminder of how wrong I had been, how foolish I had been to think that he could ever be the person I had imagined him to be. A persistent stain. A clingy parasite. Those words, repeated over and over in my head, felt like they were tattooed on my soul. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't scrub them away. I couldn't erase the image of Archer, the boy I had given everything to, calling me those names with such venom, such disdain. The betrayal wasn't just in the words themselves, though they stung like nothing else ever had. The betrayal was that I had been so blind. I had built a life with him in my mind, a future with him at the center of it all, and now, I realized it had been nothing but a fantasy. I had loved a lie. A version of him that didn't exist. I had loved him for what I wanted him to be, for the boy who had once been kind, who had once shared my dreams, who had once been my best friend. But that boy, the one I had so desperately clung to, had been replaced by someone cruel. Someone who didn't care. Someone who saw me as a problem. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't true. That maybe, just maybe, he hadn't meant it. That he was just frustrated with the pressures of senior year and exams. But deep down, I knew. He had meant it. He had meant every word. I had been nothing more than a burden to him, a source of irritation. The love I felt for him had been one-sided, a hopeless yearning for something that would never return. The worst part was the realization that I had prayed for this. I had spent so many nights in my room, whispering prayers for him, hoping that he would see me, that he would realize how much I loved him, that he would come to love me in return. But now I knew that those prayers had been for a lie, a fantasy I had woven in my mind, a fantasy that had unraveled with every cruel word he had said. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay in this town, in this life, surrounded by the memories of what we had been, or what I thought we had been. I was suffocating. I needed to escape. If I was a stain, if I was a burden, then I would show him. I would show him that I didn't need him. I wouldn't chase him, I wouldn't beg for his forgiveness, I wouldn't beg for his love. I would walk away. I would disappear. I started looking at universities in other cities. I searched for places far away from him, far away from the shadow of the boy who had shattered my heart. I wasn't running from the world, I was running from him, from the memories, from the girl I had been when I was with him. I needed to find myself again. I needed to be free of the suffocating weight of my obsession with him, the suffocating need for his approval. The thought of a fresh start, of a life without him, gave me a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. It was the only way forward. It was the only way to reclaim my life. I applied to a school in another city, far away from everything I had known. A new beginning. A new life. The day I submitted my application felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer tied to him, no longer tied to the past. I was moving on. I was breaking free. When the acceptance letter came, I almost couldn't believe it. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a gust of wind that pushed away all the suffocating thoughts, all the memories, all the pain. It was a promise of something better, something new, something I had been waiting for, something I had been needing without even realizing it. It was my great escape. My ticket out of the past. I held the letter in my hands, reading the words over and over, unable to stop the tears that welled up in my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness. They weren't tears of regret. They were tears of relief, tears of freedom. I was finally free. Free from him. Free from the lies. Free from the version of me that had clung so desperately to a love that was never real. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what life would be like in a new city, away from everything I had ever known. But for the first time in months, I felt hope. Real hope. Hope that I could rebuild myself, that I could start over, that I could become the person I had always been meant to be. Without him. Without the baggage. Without the weight of his cruelty hanging over me. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to let go of everything I had believed in, everything I had hoped for. But it was necessary. I needed to break free. I needed to reclaim myself. And so, I made plans. I packed my things, carefully folding the memories of my past, the ones that still hurt, and stored them away in the back of my mind, out of reach. I told my parents about the acceptance letter, about my decision to move to another city, to start a new life. They were supportive, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They didn't understand the full extent of what had happened, of what I had endured. But I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I was doing this for me. I was doing this to heal. The weeks leading up to my departure were filled with a strange mix of emotions. I was excited, yes, but there was also a sense of loss, a sense of leaving behind the life I had known, the life I thought I wanted. But that life was no longer mine. It never had been. It was a lie, and I was done living in it. The day I left felt surreal. As I walked out of my childhood home, suitcase in hand, I looked back one last time. There was no nostalgia, no longing. Just relief. I was walking away from everything that had kept me trapped, from the boy who had once been my best friend, from the town that had seen me at my weakest. I was leaving all of it behind. And I was finally ready to live for myself. Meanwhile, Archer went on with his life, completely oblivious to the turmoil I was going through, completely unaware of the damage he had caused, and completely confident that I would eventually come crawling back, begging for his attention. He didn't even consider the possibility that I might be done, that I might have found the strength to walk away. Instead, he moved on as though I hadn't been a part of his life at all. He went on with his daily routine, indifferent to the fact that he had shattered my world, destroyed my heart, and left me in pieces. To him, I was just a fleeting memory, an inconvenience he had gotten rid of with a few harsh words. He must have thought I was just acting out, trying to punish him for not accepting my feelings. His ego, so inflated by years of being the center of attention, convinced him that I was simply trying to get a reaction from him. He thought I was still hanging on, waiting for him to chase me. But I wasn't. I wasn't waiting for him to show up, to apologize, to realize his mistake. He had underestimated me, just as he always had. I could almost feel his assumption hanging in the air. He thought I was waiting for him to pull me back into his world. He thought I was still his, that I was still the girl who would come running whenever he snapped his fingers. He had been used to that. He had been used to me chasing him, to me admiring him from afar, to me putting him on a pedestal. But when I didn't come back, when I didn't call, when I didn't send the texts or make the visits, it must have thrown him off balance. I'm sure it left a gaping hole in his world, a space where I had once been, a space that he had never really wanted to fill. The silence, the emptiness, it must have been deafening for him. I had been the constant in his life, the girl who never wavered, who was always there. Now that I was gone, he must have realized just how much he had taken me for granted. I refused to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much I had suffered. I refused to let him see how his word had ripped me apart. I refused to be the girl who begged for him back. And yet, despite my resolve, there was still something in the pit of my stomach that churned when I saw him again. It had been months since I'd last seen him. I had moved to a different city, thrown myself into a new life, and it had worked. Slowly, I was healing. Slowly, I was learning to let go. But then, one day, there he was, standing in front of me, his face twisted with a mixture of anger, curiosity, and a strange, unshakable unease. It happened in the university cafeteria, a place I had grown to love because it felt like my own little world, a world where Archer had no power, where his shadow didn't stretch over every corner. I was sitting at a table, surrounded by my new friends. We were laughing, talking about the small, trivial things that filled our days. The joy in my heart was so evident, so pure, that I couldn't hide it. It was the kind of happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. Real, honest, untainted by the false love I had once given to Archer. But then, I saw him. He was walking toward me, his eyes locked on mine, and I felt an odd combination of satisfaction and dread settle into my chest. The dread wasn't from fear. No, it was something deeper. It was the feeling of finally confronting the past, of finally facing the boy who had once meant everything to me, but now meant nothing. He called my name, his voice strained. April, we need to talk. And with those words, I felt my entire world stop. But it wasn't the shock of hearing his voice again. It wasn't the overwhelming rush of emotion I used to feel. It was the opposite. It was calm. A cold, indifferent calm. I turned to face him, my eyes locking with his. There was no trembling in my hands, no catch in my breath. I felt nothing. He had lost his power over me. The naive girl who had once idolized him, who had hung on his every word, had disappeared. In her place was a stranger, a girl who had learned, painfully and slowly, how to let go. A girl who no longer recognized the person standing before her. About what, Archer? I asked, my voice level and controlled. Did you finally realize that I moved to a different city? Do you finally realize that your words are worthless, and your actions have consequences? My tone was almost too calm, too collected, and yet, it was laced with a strength that I hadn't known I had. This was no longer a confrontation about feelings. This was a confrontation about truth. About the ugly reality that he had created by tearing me apart with his words. He blinked, taken aback by my response, but he quickly recovered. I know you've been ignoring me, all my calls, all my texts. I need an explanation. Explanation. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I didn't know you were trying to reach me. Sorry. I've been quite busy with my new courses, my new friends, and other things. I flashed a genuine smile to my friends, to Chris in particular, letting my joy radiate for all to see. His face twisted with frustration as he tried to regain control. Look, can we talk in private? I didn't hesitate. I don't think we have anything to discuss in private, Archer. You made your feelings about me crystal clear that night before exams. I heard you. The stain. The parasite. All those horrible words you used about me. I was there. I wasn't supposed to be, but I was, and I heard it all. I heard your prayers, and they didn't match mine. His face paled. You heard. The shock in his voice was genuine, the realization that I knew everything he had said finally sinking in. Yes, Archer. I heard it all. I leaned in slightly, my eyes unwavering, steady. I heard how much of a burden I was, how annoying I was, how pathetic my love was. And you know what? I met his gaze fully, my voice low but resolute. You were right. I was pathetic. I chased you. I begged for your affection. I was always there. And for that, I'm ashamed of myself. Not for who I was, but for who I allowed you to make me. You were right to get rid of me. You were right to want me gone. His expression faltered, a mix of guilt and disbelief flashing across his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. I gave you space, Archer. I moved hundreds of kilometers away to give you all the space you wanted. And yet, here you are, still trying to control me, still not able to leave me alone. You're the only one who doesn't know how to let go, the only one who doesn't understand that my love wasn't something you deserved. My love was a prayer that you rejected. His voice cracked, desperation bleeding into his words. But But I thought you loved me. I thought you'd always be there. I thought I was your person. I laughed, but it was bitter, hollow. That wasn't love, Archer. That was a pathetic obsession. A need for your approval. But I'm over it. I am done. I paused, letting the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. True love isn't something you force. It's something that you choose. And I've chosen myself. I've chosen to move on. And I'm happier than I ever was. I smiled, this time a smile full of genuine warmth, full of life. I turned my attention to Chris, who had been watching the entire exchange. My eyes lit up when I saw him, my heart swelling with affection. And besides, I added softly, I found someone who loves me, just as deeply as I loved you. Someone who respects me. Someone who doesn't call me a stain or a parasite. He sees me, truly sees me, and he loves me for all that I am. With that, I turned my back on Archer, leaving him standing there, rooted to the spot. His presence faded behind me, swallowed up by the noise of the cafeteria and the warmth of Chris's arm around me. As we walked away, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of closure. A sense of peace that I hadn't known before. Archer had lost me. His words, his cruelty, his ego, they had all driven me away. And now, he was the one who had to live with the consequences of his actions. He had broken my heart, but in doing so, he had set me free. I had moved on. And that was something he would never be able to take back. And as I walked into the future, hand in hand with someone who truly loved me, I knew I was finally free from him. And I would never look back. Archer, on the other hand, returned to his own university, his mind plagued by the silence that surrounded him. The absence of my presence, once a constant backdrop to his life, now felt like a void he couldn't fill. I could almost hear his footsteps echo in the empty spaces between his thoughts, as he tried to understand what had happened, where things had gone wrong. I imagined him sitting with his friends, them hurling the same questions at him, but with different tones now. His pride would be chipped away, piece by piece, as they teased him, half in jest, half in pity. The great Archer, the boy who had everyone chasing after him, the boy who once thought he was untouchable, was now being forced to confront the consequences of his arrogance. What happened to April? They would ask, their voices dripping with curiosity. Where's your personal stalker now? Their words would sting, but not for the reasons they thought. It wouldn't be about me. It would be about Archer's shattered sense of superiority. He had once believed he was the one in control, the one who could cast people aside, sure that they would always return to him, no matter how much he hurt them. And now, here he was, looking at his phone, waiting for messages that would never come, wondering why the girl who once chased him no longer needed him. It would probably take him a while to understand that the world had turned, that I had become stronger without him. My absence would be his daily reminder that things were no longer as they once were. His friends would see it, too. They would witness the cracks in his carefully constructed facade, the way he faltered when they brought me up. They would snicker behind his back, sure, but beneath that humor would lie a quiet truth. Archer had failed to see the worth of the one person who had always been there for him. They would know, in the deepest parts of their hearts, that he had let something precious slip through his fingers, and no amount of swagger could change that. And in those moments of solitude, when the questions from his friends died down and the laughter faded, he would be left with his own thoughts. I imagined him sitting in his room, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a heavy stone. He would replay that night, the night when he had lashed out, the night he had called me a stain, a parasite, a burden. Those words would echo in his mind, and each time, they would hurt a little more. His pride would gnaw at him, but beneath that pride, there would be a quiet regret. He would wonder if he had treated me differently, if he had listened to me when I needed him to, if he had been kinder, more understanding. Would things have been different? Would I have stayed? Would he have recognized my love for what it truly was? I hope, somewhere deep within him, he learns the true meaning of love. Not the kind that feeds his ego, not the kind that elevates him above others, but the kind that respects, that nurtures, that sees the other person for who they are, with all their flaws and imperfections. I hope he learns that love is not a possession. It is a gift. And once given, it is a bond that should be honored, not discarded when it becomes inconvenient. His words, the ones he had thought were harmless, had caused more damage than he could have ever imagined. They had ripped through the fabric of what we had built, and now, no matter how hard he tried, there was no mending it. As for me, I moved on, but not in the way he expected. I didn't need to chase him or beg for his attention. I didn't need him to validate my worth. I found my peace in knowing that I was enough. I didn't have to sacrifice myself for someone else's approval. I found strength in the fact that I could heal, that I could walk away from the past without it holding me captive anymore. I found happiness, but not in the arms of the boy I once thought I couldn't live without. No, my happiness came from the realization that I deserved more, that I could love myself in ways he never could. I wasn't waiting for Archer to come back. I wasn't hoping for him to change. I had already changed. I had already stepped into a new chapter of my life, one that didn't revolve around him or his ego. I learned that love wasn't about force, about clinging to someone who didn't see your worth. It was about finding someone who could give as much as they took, someone who saw you as a partner, not a possession. And that's what I found. I found someone who could love me without reservation, without the need for validation or ego. Someone who respected me, saw me for who I was, and accepted all the parts of me that I had once hidden in the shadows of my insecurity. With him, I could breathe. With him, I felt whole. He didn't call me a parasite or a stain. He called me beautiful inside and out. He appreciated my quirks, my flaws, and my strengths, and he never tried to change me. I found love, not in the form of chasing someone who never saw my value, but in the quiet, steady assurance that I was worthy of everything I had dreamed of. And that love, the one I gave myself first, was the love that allowed me to move on. It gave me the strength to leave the past behind and embrace a future where I could finally be free. As I stood beside him, walking forward into this new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but smile. I had found my peace. And that was all that mattered. Question for you: have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to be called a parasite? What if the real freedom comes when you choose yourself and break free from toxic love? If you've ever been there, felt that pain, or found the strength to move on, I want to hear your story. But if you're still holding on to something that doesn't serve you, maybe it's time to let go. Choose yourself. Subscribe and join the journey of self-love, growth, and healing.